I had always thought of myself as a rational man, the kind of guy who watches the news, drinks black coffee, and believes in logic over drama. But that Tuesday night, logic packed its bags and left town without telling me. The house was quiet, eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every creak in the floor sound like a sinister warning. I had returned home early from the office, eager to watch some mindless TV and pretend the universe was still sane. Instead, the universe decided to stage its own little soap opera. It started with the messages. Innocuous at first, "Can't wait to see you tonight," and "You're incredible." The kind of words people usually save for Valentine's Day cards or really bad romantic comedies. I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes, scrolling back through months of exchanges between my wife and my best friend, the man I had trusted more than anyone else in the world. Betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, except it wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. My stomach twisted, my hands shook, and for a moment I wondered if I had stumbled into some alternate reality where people I loved were actually characters in a poorly written sitcom. I followed her like a ghost that night, every step calculated, every breath shallow. The irony of it was almost humorous if it weren't so devastating. Here I was, a 35-year-old man, shadowing my wife through the dimly lit streets of suburban America, watching her meet my so-called best friend in the parking lot of a diner that should have been hosting a family-friendly open mic night, not a clandestine rendezvous straight out of a Lifetime movie. I could hear the giggle that wasn't meant for me, the brush of hands that felt like a slap across my life. Toxic love doesn't warn you. It creeps up like smoke in a poorly ventilated kitchen, and before you know it, the entire house is aflame. I didn't confront them immediately. No, that would have been too pedestrian, too expected. Instead, I let my mind wander into the absurd. Conspiracy theories that might make Alex Jones nod in approval. Had they been planning this for months? Was there some secret society of adulterous best friends I had unknowingly joined? I pictured clandestine meetings under the guise of backyard barbecues, coded messages hidden in grocery lists, and handshakes that secretly said, "We own his lie. Life now." The more I imagined it, the more ridiculous it became. And yet the truth of it all was infinitely worse. They laughed behind my back, drank my coffee, and shared intimacy that I had believed was sacred between us. By the time she returned home, I was armed, not with a gun, not with a sledgehammer, but with the unshakable knowledge that my world had been upended. I walked past her in the living room, pretending nothing had happened, pretending that the floorboards weren't still whispering the secrets I had overheard. She smiled, oblivious, and I realized something chilling. People are astonishingly good at acting normal after committing infidelity. The universe, I thought, has a sense of irony that borders on sadistic. I made myself a drink, poured it extra strong, and contemplated the next move, feeling the first stirrings of revenge. The absurdity didn't end there. In my mind, I became a detective, a private eye in a noir film that had accidentally been written by a stand-up comedian. I imagined calling in expert consultants, a psychic who specializes in marital betrayal, a retired CIA operative who could track cell phone signals, and a cat that, if stared at long enough, might divulge the secrets of the heart. Every possible angle, every ridiculous fantasy, collided with the grim reality of what I had just discovered. Cheating, betrayal, toxic love, they weren't just words in a headline anymore. They were my life, my house, my family, distorted into a bizarre parody of itself. By midnight, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. Not tonight, not tomorrow. I would watch, I would wait, and I would plan. Revenge, I realized, isn't about impulse. It's about artistry. It's about creating a story so twisted, so perfectly ironic, that those who betrayed you finally understand the depth of the abyss they pushed you into. As I lay in bed, listening to the rhythmic snores of a woman who had shattered my trust, I smiled quietly to myself. The game had just begun, and in the shadowed theater of my mind, I was ready to take the stage. The next morning felt like waking up inside a fever dream that someone else had written. I brewed my coffee, black, bitter enough to match the taste in my mouth, and stared at the empty spot at the kitchen table where my trust used to sit. Then the phone rang. It was her, voice trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. "I need to tell you something," she said, the words rolling out slowly, carefully. I should have felt relief, maybe even a flicker of hope, but my intuition is sharp in ways that logic can't explain. I already knew. She told me she was pregnant. My first reaction was confusion. My second was a sort of morbid curiosity. Whose child? There was a pause, a weight in the air that you could almost bottle and keep on the shelf as proof of betrayal. Then she whispered it like it was a secret too shameful to breathe aloud. "It's his." She meant my best friend, the man whose hand I had once shook in trust, the man whose jokes I laughed at, the man who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner in my home while plotting the emotional dismemberment of my family. My stomach turned, and I realized I was laughing. Not because it was funny, God no, but because the absurdity was so pure it couldn't exist in reality. Only in parody, only in some twisted sitcom where reality had lost its script. I paced the kitchen, imagining the headlines. "Best friend becomes baby daddy. Family drama ensues." It sounded like a Lifetime special, complete with dramatic zoom-ins, ominous piano chords, and a narrator whispering, "The heart has a capacity for betrayal beyond comprehension." But it wasn't fiction. It was my life, and every passing second felt like an eternity of toxic love, infidelity, and humiliation. The betrayal was absolute, cinematic, complete. And yet my mind, always a contrarian, started to play tricks, turning the scenario into a theater of absurdities. I imagined a secret council of conspirators, a shadowy syndicate that orchestrated marital disasters like a stock market crash, but with more wine and less remorse. Maybe they had meetings under the pretense of bowling leagues or yoga classes, plotting my psychological downfall in meticulous detail. My wife, the pregnant queen of deceit, was their chosen operative. My best friend, her loyal accomplice, was the puppet master with a sinister grin. I could almost hear them practicing lines for the inevitable confrontation, rehearsing the perfect mixture of guilt and gaslighting. And in the corner, the universe sat back, popcorn in hand, applauding the irony. I confronted her later that afternoon, but not in a conventional sense. No tears, no begging. I let her talk, describing the complications and the unforeseen emotions, as if I were an audience member at a poorly reviewed Broadway show. I studied her every expression, the way her hand shook, the way her eyes darted when she thought I wouldn't notice. Each gesture was a confession wrapped in denial. Each sigh a small dagger twisting in the gut of my dignity. She had thought pregnancy might elicit pity, might soften my rage, but all it did was sharpen my focus. Revenge isn't born from anger alone. It's cultivated, honed like a scalpel, precise and inevitable. And the absurdities continued. I found myself laughing at the incongruities of it all, me, a betrayed husband, making mental diagrams of how to orchestrate the ultimate payback. I imagined hiring a troupe of actors to follow them around, whispering their secrets back to them in Shakespearean cadence. I pictured their faces when the child was born, and they realized that karma isn't a myth. It's a meticulous, methodical force with impeccable timing. Infidelity had a scent now, pungent and unmistakable, and I was learning to track it like a predator who has discovered that betrayal leaves breadcrumbs. As the days passed, the pregnancy became an omnipresent reminder, a ticking clock that counted down the time until my meticulously plotted revenge could unfold. I started keeping a diary, not of my feelings, but of events, who texted whom, what lies were told, which corners of our house had witnessed the clandestine rendezvous. Every note, every detail was ammunition. Toxic love had become a science, betrayal a strategy, and revenge an art form. I even started to fantasize about scenarios so outlandish they bordered on comic book absurdity. A DNA test planted at a family gathering, public confessions delivered via drones, and a final tableau where the universe itself seemed to nod in approval at the poetic justice. By the time she passed out on the couch one night, exhausted from hiding her secret and carrying the fruit of infidelity, I sat across from her and smiled quietly. Not the cruel smile of someone consumed by hate, but the cold, calculated smile of a man who had seen the play before it started, who had memorized every line, every movement, every heartbeat. I was ready. Revenge was no longer a distant concept. It was a tangible, living thing, breathing in the very air of our home. And in that moment, amidst the ridiculousness, the paranoia, and the toxic emotional theater, I felt the first spark of true power. By the third week, the house had become a theater of suspense, each room a stage, each creak in the floorboards a drum roll heralding my next move. I had decided not to confront them directly, not yet. Real revenge, I realized, doesn't scream. It whispers, it insinuates, it unfolds with the inevitability of a slow-motion car crash. My wife, oblivious to the chess game unfolding, carried on with her daily routines, blissfully unaware that her every action was being cataloged, analyzed, and eventually weaponized. I began to devise scenarios so elaborate that even the most intricate spy thrillers would have felt underwhelming. I imagined a secret dossier, thick and bound in leather, containing every text, every lie, every stolen moment of affection she had given my best friend. I pictured it sitting on my coffee table, waiting for the exact right moment when she and he would finally comprehend the magnitude of their betrayal. In my mind, they would read it and experience the exact emotional cacophony I had felt. Rage, shame, horror, and, if I played it perfectly, a little taste of regret that never quite heals. But of course, reality is never neat. Life has a way of inserting absurdity into even the most meticulous plans. While I was plotting, I discovered that my neighbors had become unwitting participants in this drama. Mrs. Henderson's cat had knocked over a vase during one of their secretive rendezvous, scattering water and petals like a natural confetti, announcing my wife's infidelity to the universe. I could almost hear the cosmic laugh. Betrayal doesn't need humans to dramatize it. The world conspires with impeccable irony. I started to think in layers of deception, building traps that were both literal and metaphorical, making my revenge a performance piece that would unfold like a darkly comedic opera. I leveraged modern technology in ways that would have made James Bond nod approvingly. Smart cameras, voice-activated recorders, GPS trackers. I used it all, but always subtly, always with the precision of a surgeon. Each tiny revelation I gathered was a thread in the web, a knot in the snare. They were moving pieces on a board that only I could see in full, each piece oblivious to the ultimate checkmate. I began leaving innocuous hints in our home, small reminders of loyalty and family that would later serve as ironic punctuation marks when they realized just how deep their transgressions had dug into the heart of my life. I even fantasized about absurd twists, like sending them an anonymous gift with a recording of their own conversations, or staging a dinner party where a DNA test would suddenly appear on the table, like a bombshell dropped with theatrical precision. Each fantasy felt deliciously perverse, a parody of the melodrama they had subjected me to. Revenge in this construct was not merely an act of punishment. It was an art form, a meticulously choreographed dance of humiliation and revelation that would leave them staring at the ruins of their moral compass. And then there were the psychological games. I began to treat my own behavior like a performance, oscillating between cold indifference and the faintest glimmers of affection, a push and pull that made her question her own sense of reality. She was so confident in her manipulations, in her toxic love affair with my best friend, that she didn't see the subtle shift. The predator she thought she had tamed was orchestrating her own downfall with a precision that felt almost fantastical. I found myself narrating the day's events in my head like a director overseeing a dark comedy. Every glance, every sigh, every small act of infidelity serving as fodder for the inevitable climax. The most satisfying part of this phase was the internal transformation. The betrayal had shifted me into someone both sharper and stranger, a man capable of embracing the absurdities of life while simultaneously plotting with deadly seriousness. The infidelity, which should have been my undoing, became the fuel for a series of machinations that merged parody with vengeance, turning my toxic love into an arsenal, my heartbreak into strategy. Every whispered secret, every stolen moment became ammunition, each revelation a potential dagger poised to strike at precisely the right moment. By the end of the third week, I had set the stage for what I knew would be a spectacularly humiliating revelation for both of them. The house, once a home, had become a theater of revenge, and I, the playwright and director, waited patiently for the curtains to rise. Toxic love had been transformed into calculated artistry, betrayal had been cataloged into neat dossiers, and infidelity had become the spark lighting the pyre of poetic justice. And as I sat back in my armchair, a glass of black coffee in hand, I smiled, not maliciously, but with the satisfaction of a man who had turned chaos into a game he alone understood, a game whose ending promised to be both inevitable and deliciously ironic. The next act was about to begin, and in the shadowed corners of my imagination, it would unfold with all the subtlety of a cosmic joke, all the drama of a Hollywood thriller, and all the satisfaction of revenge finally realized. The day finally arrived. The day I would transform months of plotting, paranoia, and dark humor into a spectacle that even the most dramatic reality show producers would envy. I woke before sunrise, the sky painted in bruised shades of purple and gold, a perfect metaphor for the storm brewing inside my house. I moved quietly, deliberately, as if the walls themselves were my allies, each floorboard a conspirator whispering, "It's time." Today the betrayal would come full circle, and revenge would finally taste like justice, laced with irony. I staged everything with absurd precision. The living room, usually cluttered with the comforting chaos of family life, became an arena. Photos were carefully rearranged to remind her of the history she had tarnished. Letters, bills, and even grocery lists were positioned as breadcrumbs, leading her toward the inevitable. Each object, each arrangement, carried subtle hints of the truth, evidence of her infidelity, reminders of toxic love, and the ever-present specter of betrayal. It was absurd, almost cartoonish, but the perfection of absurdity is that it magnifies the reality of revenge. She arrived home, and I could see it in her eyes, the faint tremor, the nervous awareness that something had shifted. My best friend, oblivious as ever, lingered nearby, smug and confident in the belief that our lives were still his to manipulate. But as the hour progressed, subtle chaos began to seep into their carefully curated world. A text message left deliberately unanswered, a misplaced photo that revealed a hidden truth, a strategically timed phone call, all small seeds of doubt, but together forming a forest of suspicion that would suffocate them both. Then came the pièce de résistance. I invited them to dinner, a seemingly innocent meal, but carefully orchestrated as the stage for the ultimate revelation. The DNA test, the final proof of the pregnancy's true paternity, was casually placed under her salad plate, disguised as a restaurant special instruction. As she reached for her fork, the test's presence became impossible to ignore. Her eyes widened, panic replacing the confidence she had carried for months. My best friend's face paled, the smug grin melting into disbelief and terror. Betrayal, toxic love, cheating, it was all laid bare in a single, devastating moment. I could almost hear the laughter of the universe, the cosmic irony that had fueled my fantasies all these months, reverberating through the walls. The weight of their guilt was palpable, a physical thing pressing against the air, thickening it with humiliation. My revenge was no longer a plan. It was a living, breathing entity, twisting and turning in real time as they processed the truth. I didn't need to yell, didn't need dramatic confrontations. The truth itself, served cold and undeniable, was a weapon far sharper than any argument I could have wielded. And yet the absurdity wasn't over. I decided to add a flourish, a final parody of their toxic love affair. I had prearranged for a group of friends to accidentally overhear the revelation, ensuring the scandal would ripple outward, a perfectly orchestrated social humiliation. Their expressions, a mixture of disbelief, shame, and horror, were the final brushstrokes on a masterpiece of revenge. Infidelity, once a secret, was now an open exhibition. Betrayal, once hidden, had been laid bare for all to see. My family, my true family, the life we had tried to build, was being reclaimed, restored not through forgiveness, but through the careful, theatrical demonstration of truth. As the night wore on, I watched them collapse under the weight of their own deception. My wife, tears streaking her face, whispered apologies that sounded hollow even to her. My best friend, once my confidant, now shrank into himself, the embodiment of hubris brought low by poetic justice. And I, the orchestrator of this darkly comedic, almost fantastical revenge, felt a mixture of satisfaction and surreal disbelief. Revenge had never felt so complete, so absurdly theatrical, and so necessary. Finally, I walked away from the chaos, leaving them to confront the ruins of their choices. Family, trust, and loyalty had been violated, and I had used betrayal and infidelity as tools not just to punish, but to reclaim my life with style and precision. The toxic love that had threatened to destroy me had been transformed into a narrative of control, cunning, and ironic justice. In the quiet aftermath, I realized something almost fantastical. Revenge is not simply about retribution. It is about reclaiming power, rewriting the story, and ensuring that those who betrayed you understand the weight of their actions in a way that transcends mere words. And as I stepped into the cool night air, leaving behind the theater of betrayal and revenge I had constructed, I felt the dark, ironic satisfaction of a man who had survived toxic love, exposed cheating, and orchestrated betrayal with both artistry and absurdity. My life, my family, and my sanity, though scarred, had been reclaimed, and the story of infidelity, betrayal, and revenge would linger like a shadow, a lesson in the surreal theater of human emotion. The curtain had fallen, but the echoes of betrayal and the laughter of revenge would linger forever.